everybody. Todd, Dammit, Kerns here. Brought to you today by our good friends at Honer Music, as always. Fine, world-class instruments. Well, I can't hear a word I'm saying. Today on the show, a very good friend of mine. He's been with the Smashing Pumpkins. Oh, hang on. Wait. He's been with the Smashing Pumpkins for the past 15 years. He's so awesome that when the original lineup reformed, he's still part of it. That's how awesome Jeff Schroeder is. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Smashing Pumpkins, my very good friend, amazing guitar player, amazing person, Jeff Schroeder. I gotta do this.
Now the fun's over. We do all the fun stuff before.
I know,
really,
you should have heard the conversation.
Yeah, really casual, really fun, talking smack about people. Now it just gets really serious and boring. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Good thing is because of the pandemic and having it's like I'm doing this not always tape interviews, because with the band with Pumpkins we do a lot of writing, recording type of meetings through. I mean, we're not jamming through Zoom, but we exchange files and then we get on and discuss what everybody's kind of perspective is. So I've gotten used to the medium.
I know it's. I mean, imagine going through this in the '80s. With sending cassette tapes back and forth.
Amazing.
It wouldn't make any sense. I was wondering the same thing, because I've had to do so much actual writing in this format too. So they haven't quite dialed it in where we can play in sync with each other. But you could play an idea and I go, okay, and I do. It's like that kind of thing. So it's challenging, but it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and also the bummer too is it's not in stereo. It does everything in mono. So if you go, I got this great guitar sound, and then it sounds like
I know. I have this great guitar sound, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So how are you? What have you been like? I know you've pretty much just nailed it on the head, everything you've been doing during this. So staying creative, doing your thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's phases. At first I think everybody was, oh wow, hey, we're gonna have, because we with Pumpkins we're supposed to tour in April, hit a couple festivals, and then we were supposed to tour with Guns N' Roses in the summer.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, then it was first well, definitely April and May are off.
I know.
But summer still, so you're like, great, I have another 2 months. I'm gonna totally practice, get into it. And then you're like, oh wait, I'm just gonna not do anything now because I'm depressed.
I know.
And then you get in reacclimated, and then but it's overall it's been very positive in that I feel like for those that have the chance, it's been a really nice time to really take a closer look under the hood, even musically, personally, emotionally, spiritually, all those kind of things. So being able to have that time, even though there have been moments where, wow, that's difficult work, whether it's on the guitar or with your mind, body kind of thing, I've been really thankful to have the time.
Yeah. It's actually good to hear you say that, because I've been saying the same thing, and it's really difficult because it's such an awful, chapter, and there's people have been going through some awful things, but and I feel kind of bad saying it's been such a positive thing for me to be able to reboot and like you say, take a look under the hood and reconnect with family, all that kind of stuff. And I think that I was talking to a friend just a minute ago and saying how much more appreciative, or not that anybody was less appreciative of it, but how much more appreciative all of us are going to be, whether you're a musician or a music lover. When a band's rolling through town, it's not like, oh, I'll go see them next year. Now it's kind of like, I think it's going to be.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was kind of just daydreaming the other day, Todd, and I was like, I wonder what the feeling is going to be like when the first band plays a real show. Not an outdoor thing, but when it's wow, okay, there's even 500 people in a packed club and it's safe and people are just able to rock out and have a good time, like how awesome that's going to be.
It's going to be transcendent, really. I mean, I can't imagine. Yeah. And I hope to be a part of something like that as well. Cause I live in Vegas, so it's a city built on entertainment. So it's kind of like, in a lot of ways, trying to keep an eye on how things are going, keeping in touch with my performer friends. I mean, you got everything. You got jugglers and hypnotists and, everything is all built on like having to do that in front of people. So to me, it's been kind of interesting, kind of paying attention to 20% capacity, 25% capacity, which is really weird when you consider what that actually means in a theater type experience. It must be like the slowest night imaginable, but at least something, you know what I mean?
Good thing that, growing up, we had plenty of practice playing those gigs.
Oh yeah, dude.
Plenty of practice of going like, oh.
When you're playing, when you're playing at a bill and you're playing for the other band that's playing that night, and then they go on and you play for them, and it's kind of like cool, but.
Yeah, but what's so funny about that? Back in the day, when I was out here, and I'm back in LA full time, and I was just in an indie band out here, and we had one of those gigs where we're playing, and there was literally the other band and like two dudes sitting at the bar drinking.
Yeah.
So we play our set, and then after, one of the guys at the bar goes, "Hey, I'm actually the music supervisor at the WB network, and I'm due music for Buffy the Vampire Slayer," which was massive. And he goes, "I love your sound." He's like, "Do you guys have an album?" And we didn't even actually have. We were just finishing like recording. We didn't even have a record or anything. We're like self-released, and so we sent it to him like a couple months later, and we got a massive song placement in a totally huge TV show.
Amazing.
From playing one of those gigs because you never know. Only takes one right person to be there.
I got a good story for you. So I'm playing at a bar somewhere in Ontario, like where Toronto is. We're working our way towards Toronto. We got one of those one nights in some little town, Sudbury or something like that. You probably wouldn't have ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's literally no one in the bar except for one guy at the bar. And this is the other side of your story. This will be the other version of what can happen. That guy, we don't even know. We're playing our set. We don't even know what's going on. That guy gets into it with like the bartender. The bartender kicks his ass or whatever, and then they throw him out of the bar, and now there's nobody in the bar. so that's the other version of your story, is you got like a guy from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we had nobody. So there's that. But so what band was that? What's that band called?
That band, we were called the Lassie Foundation.
Of course, yeah.
So
you guys had a really cool
90s.
run, though. Yeah,
90s.
It was.
Yeah.
But it was an indie. Were you fully indie? Like, did you ever sign to anything? Or
we never had like a real record deal. We had some like small indie like record labels like in Illinois. Like there was an out of the Champaign-Urbana area that put out like two of our records, and those records obviously sold the most, and they were part of that kind of post initial emo indie scene. And so, but it was like one of those things where we must have sold 10,000, 15,000 records and never got paid a dime for any of it. You know what I mean? Which is because, that wasn't that much. But like now, if you basically sold 10, 50,000 physical copies of something, we'd be like, dude, we killed it. But back then that was still considered like nothing.
No, not at all. I mean, people don't really consider that because you're right. In the punk rock world, if you could move those kind of units, I'm talking about in the punk rock world where you're like selling stuff out of the back of the car, traveling around, you'd be rolling in it. Yeah, that's a different story. Yeah. But yeah, in the indie days and in the 90s especially, because were you guys based out of Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Because the 90s was such an interesting time, because especially in LA, when we would, when I was younger, we would take our trips to LA, and it was Sunset Strip, it was Whiskey in the Roxy, which still existed within the next.
Oh, for sure.
Days,
yeah.
But then the things like the Dragonfly and all that kind of stuff that kind of popped up.
Oh yeah, Opium Den.
Yeah.
You remember Dragonfly?
Absolutely,
and Opium. Yeah, because I graduated high school in 1992, and then I immediately, like that fall, I started playing in bands that played I was born in the suburbs, and then started playing basically, and everything was still on the Strip. Nothing, there was no, kind of like farther down Sunset. You know,
Yeah.
it was still Coconut Teaser, Whiskey, Roxy, Troubadour,
Viper Room, to some degree.
Viper Room,
Eventually.
Dragonfly, and what was that one? Club Lingerie. Remember? I don't know if you remember that Club Lingerie. Yeah, you
absolutely,
know what I mean?
yeah. It's such a fascinating thing because the you know, because the 90s was such a, you know, a shift. Did you, when you came up, and I was reading a little bit about your thing, because I know you as a guitar player, I always wondered, because I only know you really from your indie band, and then I know you from the Pumpkins. So, and that's a specific kind of playing, a specific kind of thing.
Sure.
But I know you came up in a time as a kid. I'm sure you picked up the guitar, and did you want to shred? Did you want to?
Oh no, for sure. I mean, I started playing guitar probably 1983, 84 or something,
Sure.
and I, and to this day, and maybe even more so now. I mean, look at, I got Yngwie back then. You know
I see
mean?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I got. I mean, I grew up loving all those guys. George Lynch,
Sure.
you know, Yngwie, obviously Van Halen.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, interesting. Kind of by 87, and then growing up in LA, you know, Guns N' Roses they were played on KNAC even before they blew up, and so
Of course.
basically we were already, you know, big on Guns N' Roses, and so that I learned a lot of like foundational rock guitar from that record. Like I learned that record note for note. I could put it on and play the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I had a teacher, so you know, I learned, you know, I had the tab book for Guns, but I had a teacher, so I learned about arpeggios and scales and how to play over chord changes and whatnot. So I kind of had a decent grasp of what was going on. You know,
it's interesting.
And then the 90s came, and we just, you know, like I was always like I had to like downplay. You know what I mean?
We all did. It was, you know, because I was the same way. I came up as a kid learning all that stuff that we loved, and everybody sang way up here and everybody played really fast. And then the 90s came along, and it was kind of like, I mean, it wasn't like you had to go out, like, you know, you were this guy on Monday, and then Tuesday you went out, got the haircut, and got the new outfit. It was such a gradual change. And I think there was sort of an exhaustion or a fatigue to that thing, you know what I mean? And when we talk about like the transitional, like it wasn't like, I just said it recently, how like it wasn't like January 1st, 1990, the strip closed, the hair, you know, it was, everything changed. It was no, it was like it was a really gradual change. When you look at Pearl Jam or Alice in Chains or Soundgarden, they were long-haired guys, you know, they looked like they could have been metal guys 2 years ago, but kind of were shifting over. And
which Alice in Chains were, you know what I mean? They came from that, and they, you know, they were more from that world for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that, and it was interesting to watch. Isn't it interesting to see like the way Jerry Cantrell played or Kim Thale played, how it still worked, you know, contextually into the 90s. No one really questioned the fact that those guys were essentially, you know, playing hard rock guitar the way it had been played through time. Even Billy Corgan, for that matter. Billy Corgan is, you know, we all know can throw down, and which I was always pleasantly surprised when I would see you guys, because it's way more of a guitar show than you expect. Like you guys kind of like, oh damn, you guys kind of throw down more when, you know, because you don't really think of that era as having that, but it did. It was just more, I don't know, managed or something. I don't know.
And it's funny because now, like when we play live, I think it's cool because like that kind of let's say like the ideology of whatever the 90s, and it's kind of, let's call it like its philosophical aesthetic opposition to the previous era, you know, is now, you know, I mean, like it's really, it doesn't matter anymore.
No,
you know what I mean? Like it really doesn't, like if you're in 2020, 2021 and you're still playing,
you're
just a survivor. And you know what? And it means that you had songs and you had hits, and you can, and so it doesn't really matter. And it's funny because when I look out into the audience now when we play, you know, you don't see Sonic Youth shirts and Radiohead shirts. I see a lot of Kiss shirts, Def Leppard, Van Halen. Like our fan base is a rock fan base, and they want to see a rock show. So I think that's like when we play live, like we're able to emphasize that part of the band, just like tear it up. And
yeah, and because you actually have the ability to do that. It's not like you suddenly had to go, like you and Billy suddenly had to go, I guess we have to learn how to shred. It's like you guys always had that in your back pocket.
Yeah.
It was just sort of like, we just don't, it isn't necessarily done at that particular juncture. But I've seen Billy throw down where I kind of stopped and went like, even like Rivers Cuomo and those kind of guys, like a lot of the guys in the 90s they all came up on that stuff. They just didn't kind of go there. But when they went there, you were like, whoa, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it's like everybody, they just kind of came of age right at the transition. And, and the band that really was for a lot of people, that was the kind of the gateway drug, was Jane's Addiction, because they were, a little bit before were the band where they're like, wow, there's shredding guitar, really ripping stuff, but like a very like alternative feel and look. And, Eric Avery's bass was very not from a metal place, but more from that Peter Hook, Joy Division, New Order kind of thing, but with the with the Zeppelin-y kind of rock feel. It was just so cool, right?
I don't think James gets nearly enough credit for that because, like you said, it was sort of when we talk about the transition from, they want to call it hair metal, like metal or whatever you want to call it. That sort of early phase when things like Jane's came in, it was really kind of like whoa, what is this? Like it didn't really,
myself included.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, the first time I heard Mountain Song, I was like, whoa, what is this? Because it was like so different than what was going on. And I think it really sort of, like you said, was a sort of gateway drug. It really kind of was sort of like, just get ready for what's coming kind of thing. Like it was like, there's a shift coming and this is the beginning of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being a kid and, they didn't really know. There wasn't, there was 120 minutes on MTV, which was more like that old, but they didn't call it alternative back. They called it like modern rock, remember?
Yeah.
Modern rock.
Yeah.
Which was like
college rock sometimes.
College rock.
Yeah.
Which was more that kind of Pixies, jangly kind of thing. Not so much, so Jane's Addiction, they were like, I saw the Mountain Song video like on Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
Me and my friend in junior high, we had got the tape or something and we're listening to it. We're like total Beavis and Butthead, like that guy's voice is weird. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I like it because it's so weird.
I know.
You know what I mean? But we had we're kids growing up in the suburbs, it's just happening. I was lucky that by the time I was 16, I could drive half an hour up the highway, and you're like, oh my, it was like a different world.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's kind of that makes me want to. I can't believe we're already kind of like hanging around in the Jane's Addiction kind of conversation because I want to actually kind of go back to where your youth, because you grew up where did you grow up?
Orange County. So
Orange County,
like 25 miles from LA.
Yeah,
from the city.
But
yeah.
Is it like growing up in Orange County? Does it feel like Hollywood may as well be like in like, I don't know, Utah or something? Does it feel far away?
Not at all, because as you know, the urban sprawl in LA just goes and goes and goes.
Absolutely.
And so there was always, like, growing up in school and stuff, there was always like, wow, there's metal kids and there's punk rock kids and there's kids into ska, and there was like the record store where you could buy those records, and there was like the alternative clothing store where you could buy Doc Martens and monkey boots, and it was all around, like, and there were, and like I started taking guitar lessons in 86, 87, and my teacher looked like he was in Jellyfish.
Oh, wow.
He had like crazy, but he fished me in because I was in the music store, and he goes, play guitar? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, you like Van Halen? And I'm like, yeah, I love Van Halen. He plugs in a guitar and like just full blown starts playing Eruption and Hot for Teacher note for note. And I'd never seen anybody like 3 feet in front of my face play like that. And I was like, went home, was like, Mom, I need to take lessons from this guy. But but my teacher would come in, 1 week with like purple hair and stuff. And so I would, he'd wear like a red Converse and a black Converse, like, so it wasn't like, oh my God, like I'm out in the sticks. It was, I realize now that it wasn't until I started traveling with other bands, I realized like, oh, not every place is like this.
Right. Yeah. Of course not. Yeah. Because no, it's inaccurate to say Orange County is light years different than Hollywood, because it's like so much has come from that area, like, bands and great artists and stuff like that. So, but so where did you grow up? Was it the whole high school experience? Is it like, do you even like go to LA normally when you?
Oh, as soon as I turned 16, as soon as I got my license, I mean, me and my friend would, drive up to, well, because, when I was in high school, there was a band, these guys, they looked like Warrant or something, you know what I mean? Like they totally had that. And so and I remember them playing at the talent show.
Okay.
They played like Down Boys, and they played Scared
Awesome.
by Dangerous Toy. You just never forget these memories. You're like, wow, like, oh my God, like these guys are playing these songs that I see on MTV. And then and so they were like a couple years ahead of me. So they basically started this band, Dirty Tricks, I think.
Best name. That's the most accurate name of that era.
And so there's one of the guys, the bass player of this band, his sister was still going to my high school, and I was friends with her. And so as soon as we turned 16, she was like, hey, let's, my brother's band's playing at the Troubadour, and all those clubs were all ages.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool.
So as soon as, so it was like 89, 90. And so it was still like there was no like alternative music. Right. It was still 7 nights a week, like whatever you want to call it. Like,
100%. So how old are you when you first start putting your first bands together? Is that something that you do in high school?
16, yeah. When I was, soon as I was in high school, I first had a band with like two more like music nerdy kind of dudes, and we played like we were literally like playing like Joe Satriani covers.
Oh wow! Wow.
I remember we used to play like Ice Nine from Surfing with the Alien, and trying to, as good as you can,
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's ambitious though, for like teenagers to be going like, here we go.
Yeah. But then a little bit later, I met another kid who was a really good guitar player too. So it was that great thing where we would just go to each other's houses and be like, oh, look I learned this lick. And he took, and so then we started a band, and we played like Cinderella and Guns N' Roses and
awesome.
All that stuff. But it was, it was just jarring because we played all that. We had originals too. We had originals that were very in that vein.
Sure.
And, but I remember it was so jarring because it was like a division, because we still had that band when Nirvana came out.
Right. Yeah.
And our singer who played guitar and kind of wrote a lot of songs, he was my friend who's a really good guitar player. And he took guitar lessons from like this guy, Tracy G, who played in like World War III.
Okay, yeah, I know who you're talking
and
about.
I think he might have been in Dio even for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those guys for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was like, we're not changing our style. We're not gonna like jump on this bandwagon.
The last of the Mohicans.
Yeah. It seems so funny now. I laugh at it, but because I was really I mean, Todd, I distinctly remember because I started high school in 1998, and that summer of '88 is when Guns exploded, Switch on the Mind, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like that first day of school, I had so many Guns N' Roses shirts.
Oh yeah.
And then by the time I graduated, which was June of 1992, it had completely changed. It was like everybody was into Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden, and
it's funny because a lot of people talk like that's like Black Friday or like more like a Black Monday kind of, where it's like it was dark days for the empire when suddenly this new music came in, and I kind of in reality I remember it being really exciting because it seemed like there was something. I mean, I really honestly feel like there was a certain amount of fatigue that was going on with like, okay, here's another version of whatever, because like you said, I think Guns really came in. Appetite really changed the game in a very different way, like earlier on, where, there was a certain kind of metal that was going on. Then Guns came in and really sort of, was pretty jarring in that moment.
Yeah.
Then I think Jane's, and I think Jellyfish is interesting that you bring them up too, because around that time, I remember it being like, these guys are so interesting and so cool, these new things that are coming out, that it started to kind of like, I think the interest, and as what always happens, that younger generation is coming up. This is their music. They're kind of into this. And then all of a sudden that shift happens. And then, you know, as awful as it is to imagine your entire career getting kind of like a complete full stop because you're not cool anymore or whatever, it was very exciting for those of us playing music or into music because there was new stuff coming hot and heavy all the time. You know what I mean? And it never stopped for a long time.
And I think that what probably for you and I, what connected all those eras is that it was still a very song oriented era.
Absolutely.
And so if you were into songs, you were fine.
Absolutely.
You know, it was just, and you still got to play with distortion and, you know, and take some leads, but there are going to be more melodic things and whatever, all good, you know.
Did you find that, is that where guys like Jay Mascis, like, I mean, like, because, you know, it was an interesting time because there were still what we would consider guitar heroes, like guys that, you know, a million kids picked up guitars because of that guy and that guy and that guy, even during that era. It just was a different thing completely than it was 5, 10 years before.
For sure. No, I was at one point in my life a big Dinosaur Jr. fan, and then I got really into obviously a lot of the British stuff, like the shoegaze of Ride and My Bloody Valentine and The Verve, and
absolutely,
I loved all that kind of stuff, probably more than American indie stuff, because you know, the British stuff was still like, it wasn't like, maybe it was indie for them, but like it all came out on major label stuff out here, and the production value was a little bit higher, and it was like it's kind of more connected to like 60s psychedelic music.
It was, absolutely.
And I loved all of that, but I saw all those bands. Like I saw Dinosaur many times, Sonic Youth, which I'm still like, to me, it's a band like Sonic Youth. To me, like, I realize I even appreciate them more now because they were really unique on the guitar, you know, in that they created their own universe, their own language, their own way of playing, their own way of tuning the guitar that really still holds up over time. Where, you know, like any types of movements, you know, whether it's the 70s, 80s, whatever, there's stuff that you know, the good stuff is always good, and then you realize, wow, maybe that a lot of that stuff in the middle wasn't so great.
Oh yeah. We always do that. If you know, when you think about the music that you loved as a kid, you always go back, you dig out that record and you go, this is still awesome. And then other things you'll dig out and go, I think I had to be 14 at the time, but you know, that's okay because it's all has its place.
Yeah. And it's funny, like now, you know, I find myself, I really like I like the stuff in the 80s a lot more than, like, I don't listen to much 90s music.
It is funny, you know, it is interesting that, I mean, there's still a gigantic wealth of music that came out of the 90s, but it is weird how, I don't know if it's this particular juncture we're in now where, like, if you and I were going to put we're going to go do a cover jam night over at this place, it's probably going to be largely 80s music that we're going to play because it's like, you know, as soon as you start playing that stuff, it's a good time, it's fun, it is what it is.
Yeah. And you know, what's really to me like fascinating about it when I go back and I think as a music lover is that, you know, if we take a year like 1986 or something, like from a commercial standpoint, hard rock, metal, whatever, you're talking like, I saw like a Billboard top 10 chart one, you know, recently from 87, and it was like shocking. Like in the top 10, like 6 or 7 of the albums were basically hard rock or metal bands, you know, selling millions of records, you know?
Yeah.
So as a guitar player, you could be a Steve Vai, be playing the most progressive avant-garde style of guitar technique, literally pushing the boundaries of what the instrument can do, not only like technique wise, but sonically, and play on a #1 album and have hit songs on MTV. Like, it was a really beautiful moment that I don't know if, like, now you can have, you know, hits that are like whatever streaming hits or whatever, but you're probably not going to find a lot of high level musicianship on any of those tracks.
It's very interesting that you bring that up because that is true, that it wasn't like, I mean, you really had to be able to hang in that particular juncture. You couldn't have like, you know, everybody could play. the guy could sing, that guy could play guitar, and that guy could play the drums. You know, it was like everybody could hang. You know what I mean? And
like, yeah, like you had to be like, you know, if you didn't have to be a virtuoso on the guitar. And there were certainly some bands that like
sure,
had tons of hits that didn't have like, you know, like virtuoso level guitar players, like, you know, and I love CC Poison, but it's, you know,
yeah,
he's not,
great.
you know, he wasn't out there competing with Steve Vai or anything,
No.
but man, he sure wrote a lot of hits.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
He did his thing. I mean, that's, you know, that,
yeah.
I think that's kind of the beauty of that entire thing. So now when you start, is that shift pretty fast? So you're doing your band, you're doing like, your singer's not going to change. This is it. We're doing this lip service headbands and the, you know, whatever.
Totally. No, what happened? So what happened is that summer I graduated high school, I ran into my guitar teacher, you know, at a, you know, this was early coffee house, like open mic, like, you know, this place in Orange County. And I was like, hey, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should take a few lessons again. And he's like, yeah, I'm not teaching at the store. You can just come to my house. And you know, and so I started going to his house, and his roommate was in a band that was starting to play LA a lot, you know, and at the time these guys seemed so much older than me. Like they were like 26 and I was 18, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was like, yeah. And so I was, and so one day I went for a lesson, and I guess my teacher's roommate heard me playing through you know, they shared a wall. And so after I left, he went to my teacher, like, hey, who was that? Who are you playing guitar with? He goes, oh, it's one of my students. He goes, you know, we need a guitar player for the band. Can I get that kid's number? And so I joined this band. So then that was great because I went from being in the garage, like a high school garage band, to like, hey, we're playing the Whiskey and we're playing the Coconut Teaser and we're
cool,
you know, playing the Strip and it was crazy. Like it happened so fast. Like we went and made a demo, and Len Fagan, who booked the Coconut Teaser,
right,
loved the band. Like he just loved us. We were called this band called the Violet Burning. He loved the band, and he got every A&R person to come out to see us. And like, but I mean, this is like, I was like 19 or something. Sylvia Rohn, who was a huge, you know, record executive, she ran basically as Elektra. They flew out in New York. We did the private showcase at SIR. They were like, we want to sign you guys. I was like, they put us up at like this Sunset Marquee, you know, for the, I was like, oh my God, like I did it, you know, and then like a week later, it totally fell through. Like, you know, like someone down the line, like didn't like the band. We're like, we're not signing that band. And like, then it was like, we were like the plague.
Oh boy.
Like once you know what I mean? Like once you're like, oh, they're getting signed. Oh, they did it now. Like, you know, we couldn't get anything. But you know,
it's like
continued.
It's like the scarlet letter of like someone has passed on this band, so everybody should pass on them, kind of thing. Yeah. And
then we ended up, you know, just doing that LA thing for like 3 more years before we're like, okay, this kind of implodes. And
what kind of music was that band? Like, are we talking what year? What year are we talking?
92 to 95, 96. You know, it was definitely more like it was more like Pumpkins, Radiohead, or like Ben's era Radiohead,
sure.
like you know, like that big guitars, you know, semi-atmospheric kind of stuff.
So did you find, let me ask you this, because I always think this is interesting as guitar players, because that shift into Pumpkins, Radiohead is still, the guitar is a very prominent part of what's happening, but it does create this sort of like, now you're living in a world of, you know, like you start getting into effects and stuff like that. Do you find yourself
totally.
Like, it's all like,
I mean, it's still racks, you know, it's like it had a rack, you know, I had the ADA MP1 preamp, Elisa's Quadriverb, Rocktron and Telefx. You know, people really didn't use pedals back then. Even at that point, it really wasn't a pedal era. You know what I mean? Like, because you're like, I'm not going to use a Boss distortion pedal. Like when you have this ADA or Boogie preamp, you know, or so it was definitely all rack effects.
It's interesting to me because it kind of goes from a technique thing, although there's obviously technique involved in all that guitar playing, you know, the guys from Radiohead and other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing entirely. And there is a lot more of an atmospheric, it's a vibe, it's a thing, it's a colors, scapes and things going on. But that's interesting because this sort of leads me into this kind of like what I witness when you do the pumpkins and stuff like that is your ability to, okay, so watch, it's deceiving because I can see that you can hang in these different areas where it's, you know, like that atmospheric lush type thing. And then the straight up, like, here we go, balls to the wall, you know, it's, so that's clearly when you started to get that part of your, you know, your world was in that particular era when that started to present itself.
Yeah. And I think, you know, what I really learned from that era as a guitar player, because I was like, you know, the singer sang and played guitar, was kind of doing the heavy rhythm lifting. And my job was to kind of sit on top of that and create the textures, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what I learned, I had to learn because I didn't have it growing up, you know, coming from more of like the metal stuff, is that it's very reactive to what's happening vocally.
Interesting.
You know, like it and that's kind of a Beatles thing, right? Where it's like vocal, counter melody, vocal, you know, and so it's a relationship, it's a dynamic. And so even in Pumpkins, that's where like joining that band, I knew how to do that kind of stuff. And then also that's where I really cut my teeth on having to play more that kind of Curie atmospheric type of stuff. And I know Billy said that when they were auditioning guitar players, that they didn't audition that many people, because I know I was the very first person they auditioned, and I think they were like, "What?" They're like, "It can't be this easy." Like, so we got to try out other people. You know what I mean? Right, so they, you know, because I was like the first one, and Jimmy Chamberlain was like, "We're done. Like, what do we need to do?" You know, but Billy said that you'd get guys that could really play the heavy stuff really well, but when it came to playing like the mellow, pretty atmosphere, they just couldn't do it, didn't know what to do. And then you'd find like the more alternative guitar players could play like the atmospheric pretty stuff, but when you had to lay down and play heavy, just couldn't play heavy. So, you know, having to be like, you had to have kind of, and it kind of comes full circle to where we started, you had to kind of grown up in that era to where you were conversant in both worlds to really play that style convincingly.
It's a deceptive gig that way, because I think that people assume, you know, I mean, there's a lot of great guitar players who are great in their own right, but aren't qualified for such a gig because, like you say, if you haven't legitimately lived through that particular chapter or that particular chapter, you don't have both those sides to kind of pull out when they need to be pulled out. And that's what's so weird about it. But when you go from that era, when we're talking about, how long are you in LA before you, I know you ended up leaving LA. Is it still kind of like you're still around LA for a while yet by this point?
Yeah. See, at the time I joined the Pumpkins, I'd actually kind of given up, like, okay, I'm not going to be a professional musician anymore. And I was going to UCLA, I was actually getting a graduate degree, my doctorate in literature.
You're finishing that now, aren't you?
No, I left. Oh. I left 10 years ago.
But, you did.
Wikipedia,
okay.
They don't. You know, I've tried to go in and up to, but they're like, because I don't ever post on Wikipedia. They're like, this information's inaccurate. I'm like, but I'm the one telling it to you. You know,
I know.
Like, it's so weird that they don't have like a way to verify, like, hey, like I'm actually that person. Like I can give you the correct information. You know what I mean? But whatever.
Don't even get me started. Yeah, it's like they're all mistaken in their own way. But yeah, so you're actually like what you're actually going to pursue. Like you're kind of like saying goodbye to music. I'm going to pursue this and see where it takes me, kind of thing, or what?
Yeah. And then, I was lucky that when I applied to graduate schools, I actually got to stay in LA because I got into UCLA, and so it was great. And so and you know how it is. It's like the degrees of connection to someone in the music industry in LA is it's like everybody knows somebody. And so an old bandmate of mine from the Lassie Foundation, he's a graphic designer, and he was like one of those people who was online, like one of the very first people I ever knew. He's like, there's this thing called the internet. So he was always like on instant messengers and stuff. And so he knew some girl that worked at the Pumpkins management.
Okay.
And so he texted me one day and he said, "Hey, this is crazy, but Smashing Pumpkins are getting back together. James Iha's not coming back to the band. And I really think you should, like, you're the perfect person to join that band." And I was like, I'd never really auditioned for a band. You know
I
what I
know.
mean? Like the
That's a
one
whole
time I
other
joined the
thing.
one band, yeah, like I wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna audition to be in someone's band. Like, here's my bio, here's my headshot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't have any of that. So they're like,
Right.
well, you got to send a bio and and so I just wrote it myself, like, okay, I went home and like wrote a bio and because I was such a big fan of the band, I'm like, I could list the guitar players that Billy will be like, this guy, and so I was able to list like Richie Blackmore, Kevin Shields, all this stuff that to where he was like, this is the perfect person, you know what I mean? So I got a call like the next day, like, hey, we want to come meet you, and but yeah, so I just, and I did it, and it wasn't like a thing where I auditioned one time and they said, okay, you got to think it lasted months. They were like,
So, and did they do that in Los Angeles? Like, were they doing it in LA?
yeah, they were
Okay.
out here in like the fall of 2006 making an
Okay.
album, but it was just Billy and Jimmy, the drummer, no one else
Right.
was in the
Right.
band. And it was crazy because they had already gone through like 2 or 3 other producers. And so by the time like I kind of started hanging with them, Roy Thomas Baker was producing the record.
Wow, dude.
And so I'm just like literally in graduate school, and then you're like, wow, I'm auditioning for this band. You walk into a studio, there's Roy Thomas Baker, like he had the Rolls Royce in the parking lot.
Of course. I would be disappointed if he didn't have a Rolls Royce in the parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, oh my God. So, and they were great. They were because I lived like they were at the Village Recorder.
Okay.
And I lived
Yeah.
and that's right by UCLA. So I was living. So I would go jam, and then they'd be like, if you want to come, you can come hang out the studio anytime you want. Like, in fact, we want you to because we want to get to know you. And so it was like this thing that went on for months.
So
And
crazy. Wow. It's such an interesting, what an interesting, because it depends on the gig, because sometimes it's kind of like you're in the band and we're going on the road tomorrow, but you're kind of in this weird transitional, it almost sounds more comfortable in a way to kind of be hanging around, getting to know the guys, listening to this thing kind of happen. How was that working? Was Billy playing pretty much everything besides the drums at that point?
he did. Yeah, he did everything.
Wasn't that sort of the MO anyway in some ways? I don't know.
It really was on those. I mean, definitely on I think on Gish and Siamese Dream, it's like 98% him. I think on Melancholy, they told me that Flood was like, it's weird, Flood came in and was like, wow, he's like, like there's the studio version of the band, which is great, obviously, and then there's like the live version, which is totally different because the studio version was like an idealized version of what Billy heard in his head, and he obviously could do the playing to create all those things, but live it was totally different. There's no way 2 guitar players can play like 40 guitar tracks.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but Flood was like the first one to go. He's like, that's great, and I know where I want to use that idealized. He's like, but I think if you're going to do a double album, you need to have peaks and valleys. And he's like, I want some of the aggression of what I hear live. So there's some like songs on there where it's definitely the whole band.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I think, I mean, looking back on what a great thing that was, and what an interesting, the Pumpkins were always so unique. And so, and I guess because maybe it was the Chicago thing, or, it's just like there's great stuff coming out of Chicago too at that time. Urge Overkill, Baruch Assault, whatever was happening over there.
Well, then also all the whack like Ministry and all that that industrial stuff came from there.
Good point. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So, wow, it's kind of really crazy to hear you say that. So when you joined, how soon, were you still going to school, or did you kind of have to wrap that up?
Well, that was like a funny thing, like, so I had to, UCLA's on course. So I think I was able to do like the winter quarter, which ended like in March. And then I knew I was going to be, and like, cause in April we're starting rehearsals, and it was just like, that tour was like a year over, back then it's like that, it was like a year of touring pretty much almost nonstop. And so I remember telling my advisors like, hey, I think I didn't quit at that time, like forever. I was like, hey, I'm going to take a leave of absence for a year because they're like, I'm joining a band and going to go on. And they're like, what? Because I didn't, I wasn't going in my lick, like going like, hey, I'm a guitar player. I'm a rock, I mean, I was just, I was
a regular dude.
very, very serious about doing something else. So they were like, and they don't know who the band, like, they were just like, what? Like,
did they know? If you don't think that they would have said, if you would have said, I can't come to school, I'm running away to tour with the Smashing Pumpkins, that they wouldn't have thought maybe you were insane or something?
Yeah, they were, but then they were all super cool, and like some of them would, they eventually came to shows and was like, hey, my kids want to come, like I'd be like, because I remember we did a thing for Guitar Hero one time, and then that was really big. So, and like one of my advisors, she was like, my son really wants to get into that Guitar Hero party. Can we come? I'd be like, of course,
Amazing.
So
amazing.
Once they saw it, they were like, oh, okay, like you should totally do that because that's way more fun than being an academic.
Well, even academics want to be in rock bands. Come on.
Yeah. And then you learn, like, as you and I know, you learn the reality of any job and of any situation, and it's not. It's not all what it's cracked up.
The thing
not complaining about it, but it's like you have, and I'm sure you can attest, you have no idea what you're getting into.
No, and that's what's funny about this story is because you don't even have that sort of like. Then we hopped in vans and drove to across the country playing shows, sleeping on floors.
A little bit of that with like Lassie Foundation. And
sure,
other band. We did a bit of that, so right. I knew like 5 or 6 guys in one Motel 6 room.
Sure, yeah. When you're young, that doesn't even seem that crazy. It just seems kind of like,
amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. It's like a trip.
I was having the time of my life. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. But then all of a sudden you're in the Pumpkins, and it's a whole other level. Like it's a whole, like you're one of the biggest bands in the world at that time. Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden you're staying at like these ridiculously expensive hotels, and like. You know what I mean? You're like
in your own room. There's not. Where's the other 5? Where's the other 5 guys to crash in here? Like whatever.
You're flying first class, and you're like your own hotel room, and I have a guitar tech. I only, the thing is, I only had 2 guitars. And so I show up to the first rehearsal, and I go in there. I'm like, wow, there's like 2 Wagner heads, 2 Diesel heads, like 4 Les Pauls, like all, like they had to buy like all this gear for me because I'm like I just remember we were at the Village Recorder still, and basically the band kind of like day-to-day manager kind of guy that worked for the band, he has the yellow pad. He goes, okay, Jeff, we need to buy some gear for you. What pedals do you want? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, what do you want? And I'm like, wow. Well, can I get one? I'm like, and then like, they just ordered like all these pedals, and I mean, it was crazy.
Man, it's like Christmas or something. Just kind of walked right into it, yeah.
But just imagine, okay, and like again, like this is the kind of stuff that only, so it's like, I mean, I could play on my gear, but I was used to using kind of shitty gear, and I could play pretty good on my crappy gear because I knew how to manipulate it. So.
Sure.
But I never owned a Les Paul. I could never afford a Les Paul back. That was it was in the indie band. I had like, 2 Fender guitars, and like, I mean, like my beat up gear that was, that I could make it sound good, but like all of a sudden you go having like these Diesel, Wagner, high gain heads. I'd never played a Les Paul. So you're like there to go play the first song. You're playing through an amp you've never played, through a guitar you've never played. And Billy's like, why are you sucking so bad? Like he was on my ass. He was on my ass. He's like, wow, you got a world tour coming up. You got to get it together. I'm like,
really?
Dude, I'm like, this is like the first 10 minutes. I'm like, I've never even played any of this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's basically taking you like out of your comfort zone and going like, now do what you do, but do it with this whole new thing, like
But and then also too, like, because he hadn't whittled down what songs we were going to actually play, right. And he wanted to change the set list never play. Like we would play some of the same songs, but he'd like to change the order and add different songs. So I mean, I think the set, like the song list was like 60 songs.
Oh my God. Jesus.
But
Wow.
you know what? But you know what I figured out is I went back and I was staying at I was in Chicago and I was staying at one of those places, you know, the Oakwoods,
Okay.
this kind of furnished
Yeah.
apartment. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And I sat there and I thought about it and I go, okay, I got it. And so I went the next day. He's like, like kind of like giving me attitude. And I said, hey, I know what you're doing. You just want me to get better. And I said, I really appreciate that. So be as hard on me as you can. And
Really?
he was like, because I want to be as good as I can be too.
That's great.
He was just like, and then all of a sudden everything was totally cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I just realized I'm like, wow, like this is hard, and
wow.
I I had to put in the time. I mean, so if rehearsals were 6 hours, I would go there at night, we would start at like 1 p.m. or something. I would get there at 9 a.m. And,
wow.
And I had a little room and I would working on sounds, working on parts, like just so I could get my shit together, because it was, I'd only played like indie clubs and, I never played anything. I mean, just even playing that loud.
Yeah, I know.
Like you're just like, oh my God, it's so crazy loud. And, then so you have to wear earplugs because it's just, I mean, it was like, rehearsing with huge side fills and
yeah.
two stacks. I mean, it was in Jimmy Chamberlain's like,
yeah, I know.
like like monster drummer. It was like,
I can't imagine.
I'm laughing now because I was so over my head, and then and like now, I've done it for so long that it's like it's so fun, like it's so comfortable.
Yeah,
now.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it take for that to snap into, like, for it to be good, to be normal, to be right?
I mean, I think it really took 3 or 4 years of like,
oh yeah,
of like, I mean, I listen back and I hear us playing at that, and it's good, but I was always I couldn't. I had to work a lot on my playing. I really had to be like, I want to play even better.
Right.
And so that was like a certain type of personal commitment to be like, okay, like, dude, I'm lucky. I'm a lucky guy that I get to play guitar for a living now.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I certainly don't need to be that much better to play like the music that we play in the Pumpkins. But as you know, if you can play to a certain ability, even if you're playing simple stuff, you make that simple stuff sound even better.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
because it's a certain kind of confidence command, like the way that even just if you're able to make the guitar tonally sound better because of the confidence that you have through the playing.
Absolutely.
And yeah. So I really had to put in some time, and so now I really love, like, I love it. I miss it so bad because it's just so fun.
What was it like as far as, I mean, you've seen some faces come and go. The fact that you've actually been there as long as you have, I think that makes you probably the longest standing member in one solid run.
It's actually probably true.
Yeah, I thought about it and I was thinking, like, when I think of the faces that sort of came and went, including Jimmy's kind of like come and gone.
Yeah.
But it sort of puts you in a position where, other than Billy, you're sort of the longest standing, in one block. You've been there, what?
15 years almost now.
15 years. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing to consider. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what was obviously, if you're on the outside looking in, like the scariest thing is like, oh, the original band's getting back together. If you're part of like the newer version of the band, you're like, well, what's that mean for me? But Billy was very, very, very transparent and cool about it. And he, was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And I'm telling you right now, it's like, if it all works, but you're going to still be part of this. Like, you're not going anywhere. So so from the very, so there was no like threat, so he made it a situation where, like, wow, I hope this happens because this is going to be better for everybody if it does.
Well, and it also does create this interesting, because it was funny that you brought that up. In a lot of the recordings, you know, in listening to it, just the wealth of guitars that are happening on those records, it just makes sense to me that to have you there to be able to kind of create this other layer, you know what I mean?
Well, and you know, the world, you know, like say by to get to 2018 when we're going to do this is much different than like 1999 or in the 90s when the original band broke. And so like everybody has a cell phone, everybody's making recordings of what you sound like in concert. People
100%.
that, you know, so many other bands are playing backing tracks. So people are used to hearing like really tight music, even live. And so I think Billy knew like we can't just go and be like we were in the 90s. Like it has to be, we have to elevate, everything has to be better and strong. So I think like having the ability to really orchestrate the guitars in a way that's truer, more authentic to the recordings was very important.
And that's got to be fun for you now, as like working with two other guitars, is figuring out where, you know, like the Foo Fighters have been doing it for years, but I mean, figuring out what you're doing. I'm assuming James comes in, James is playing pretty much what he played on his parts back in the day, I assume.
Pretty much, exactly. Yeah.
And then you just kind of figure out where you sit within Billy and James.
But he's such a sweetheart. Like, you know, people always say he was just so great. And, you know, from day one, and he's like, hey, if I'm ever stepping on your toes, just let me know. I have no ego about this at all. And so there've been a few times where he's like, you know, you can play that part way better than me. Why don't you just do it? Or, you know what I mean? Or,
that's so great.
You know, and there's certain things that are like, you know, like I always used to play the Zero solo when he wasn't in the band, and, you know, but it's like so cool to hear him do it because it was really like his thing. And, you know what I mean? Like, and so like having that, like that element where like it's strange. Like you would think like adding another guitar player would be even more restricting, and in some way it is. Like you really do have to check your ego out the door. You're about like, okay, let's just make the band sound great.
Sure.
But in another way, it's actually been super liberating in that now, because I used to have to try to play like kind of like him, kind of like Billy. Sure. But now since they're doing their thing, it's like there's like this new space where like when I get to play more like me.
Sure, yeah.
I get to do my thing. And so now it's like the roles over like the last 2.5, 3 years have become like, it's pretty seamless. Like we don't even really talk, like when we start playing, adding the new songs and set, we don't even really talk about who's going to do what. Like it just kind of like makes sense.
I think it actually makes a lot of sense when, like I said, when you have that much kind of color and layers and things of guitars, it only makes sense to be able to have that, to be able to pull it off in a live context completely.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that about you guys, that you don't, I appreciate that Billy has that sort of like sense of like, well, it's, you know, the 21st century, bands are playing to tracks, bands are, you know, adding extra members, you know, they got a keyboard player and a backup singers and whatever to make, to implement this entire, the things that are missing from recordings. When I was a kid, I don't know about you, but I love listening to Song Remains the Same or Live at Leeds, and you would hear the band playing, you know, the recordings have horns on them or, you know, all this stuff, and then the band would just go out and play it as this rock band, almost punk rock when you listen to like Live at Leeds.
Totally.
The energy would just completely change. So to me, I'm like, but it is a different mentality here in the 21st century, that this is the record I listen to at home and in the car on the way to the concert. And then I walk into the concert, this sounds different than what you know what I mean? I'm like, of course it's going to sound different. There's human beings playing it. The BPM bounces up, you know, it's a little quicker, you know, sometimes if you've only got one guitar player, when he goes to the solo, the rhythm track drops out, that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff, but it is interesting to see it a little different these days. But
and another thing too is where it's a big benefit, especially doing like the bigger arena shows or headlining festivals where it's like a different thing. It actually allows Billy to get off the guitar for a lot more songs and work the crowd, and because you have to think of like the show part of it. So
absolutely,
fans love when he's off the guitar and he can roam around the stage and do his like kind of goth guy like up there, and it's like it's a big part of like having that liberation where he's not having to stand up there the whole time in the middle. it's again, that's that pays really big dividends to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Again, another thing I appreciate is that sort of like, this is bigger than just guys playing music. It's a thing. We're playing. If you're going to have the audacity to stand in front of people and play, then it's immediately a show, isn't it? You know.
It is,
Yeah.
and that's the fun part of it, actually.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's what we all wanted to do, was to be able to get on stage and play.
Yeah.
Well, that's really exciting. I honestly, I could do this for 2 hours, because I'm like, okay, so now tell me about the first chapter when you joined, and then spend like 4 hours talking about all the different bass players and who. So were you involved? Just really quickly, were you involved when they decided you joined the band? Were you involved in auditioning bass players at that point? Like, are you suddenly...
I auditioned. Yeah, I was able to play with
100.
Played with, like, Jimmy would basically, sometimes it just made me and Jimmy Chamberlain and like whatever bass player was coming through the door that day. And so I got to audition a lot.
Slash did that to us too. Slash was like, we're looking for a guitar player. So Brent and I are playing with every guitar player in the
Would he show up? I would just be like, you guys.
Just us. And then eventually we kind of had to narrow it down to who we thought was cool, and or whatever was kind of working. And then then he would come down and jam with those guys. But so who was the bass player the first time around when you came in?
Ginger, her name is Ginger Pooley now, but Ginger Reyes was her name at the time. And and she's great, and she's still, we're all still friends. And then there was a girl, Nicole Fiorentino, after Ginger. And then there was a weird period, like after that era, where Billy and I made the Monuments to an Elegy album, and it was him and I were the only guys in the band, and Tommy Lee played drums on that record.
That's so crazy. I remember, that's a great record, man.
Yeah, and that was just, we're just sitting there, we're writing all these songs to a drum machine, and we're like, this song needs like that LA, like, that LA street, like something like Tommy Lee would play. And then Billy goes, he's like, what if we call Tommy Lee? Yeah. He's like, I got his number. And like within a week later, we were sending him, he was like, because we were like, oh, maybe he'll play on a song or two. And he was like, if I do it, I want to play on the whole record. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. So, but then he obviously couldn't tour with us.
Of course.
And so there was like a weird 6 months where Brad Wilk from Rage Against the Machine and
we did Australia together. We did the Soundwave Festival.
That's right. Yeah,
and you guys had Brad on drums. Manson was on that. It was the craziest Soundwave. Slipknot, I think.
Mark Sturmer from the Killers was playing bass with us.
That's right.
Yeah. And I
cool...
remember going like, I was like, you know what, like every time I would walk on stage with those people, I'd be like, dude, like how am I up here? Yeah, and I know how that feels. Like you're like, how did I get on stage with these people? Like this is really cool. But I would really try to take it in and go like, I know this isn't going to last forever.
Of course,
and really just appreciate, because like part of with guys, those guys were all like, we got along great, but to be really part of a band, there's a certain kind of band mentality, and those guys were coming from other really big bands where they have their own band mentality, and so, and you know how it is, like so they were, it was fine, but you knew it would probably not be something that was going to be like the super group that was going to. I was going to say,
forever. for all intents and purposes, that's a super group. It just happens to be called Smashing Pumpkins. So currently but go ahead.
No, and it was awesome.
It was amazing, yeah. So currently it's yourself, James, Jimmy, and Billy. Jack's playing bass?
And Jack Bates, Peter Hook's son. Yeah.
Peter Hook's son is playing bass, who is a dope-ass bass player.
I know.
He also plays in that, what's Peter's other thing called now?
Peter Hook and the Light.
Dude, it's so crazy. I just think that's so great that Jack's doing that. I can't wait to see this lineup. I mean, have you guys got any sort of, let's wrap it up with the 2021 plans, if that ever presents itself?
Well, we still have, last 2020 we were supposed to headline the Shaky Knees Festival in Atlanta, I think is where it is, in Georgia, and then Riot Fest in Chicago, and those dates have been moved to late summer, fall of 2021. So
Right.
they say, but
Yeah, who knows?
I mean, I hope we're doing them, but at the same time, are 40,000 people going to be out in the field together?
Probably. Honestly, I think people
Yeah,
are so
I don't
desperate
know.
to see rock and roll, and I mean, I'm hoping everybody's safe enough to do that. But I think when the day they say that they can, they will. How long you been back in LA?
I came out here. I mean, I was kind of mostly basically living here,
Right.
but officially, where I actually moved on July.
Oh wow! So
I had to move in the middle of the pandemic,
Oh,
which wasn't that big of it because obviously used movers, but moving companies won't move gear.
Oh yeah, right.
Because for insurance, and you wouldn't want them to anyway.
No.
And normally, if it was like a normal, like, hey, there's a zillion bands on tour, with the production manager, you could put a bunch of stuff on a pallet and somebody would be like, yeah, we'll pick up your stuff and we're on our way to LA. And it wouldn't be, but that obviously wasn't the case. So my friend, Britt Panella, I was like, dude, like he's such an awesome dude. Like
he's the best.
He was like, all right, I'll come out there. And so he flew out to Chicago. Him and I, rented a U-Haul, went to the warehouse. I didn't, I left, all my Pumpkins touring stuff, but like all my personal things.
Sure, yeah.
And drove
everything we're seeing behind you, pretty much. Yeah. To some
wow, that's just a few. I mean, I brought like 50 guitars.
I love it. And you showed up at the Pumpkins with 2 guitars. So there you go. You're up by 48.
Isn't that
at least.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how it's just,
I know. Well, I mean, it's yeah,
I know.
It's embarrassing.
I know. Just what's the Van Halen? Is that the 5150 one?
It's one of the cheaper 5150s they made. I just I had to have. I'm not qualified.
It's an EVH one. It's the EVH.
It's an EVH,
one.
Yeah. It's an
but
EVH,
it's the 5150, right? Does it have, that's cool.
It's the best, yeah.
I totally wanted to get, after Ed passed, I was like, and then I was really like, there's like no way anybody's gonna be able to get any of these guitars for a long time.
Well, I mean, they make so many. They make the first album one and the second album one.
Yeah.
They make all these different versions now, and I saw that and I was like, I need to have that just to even like because there's a Paul McCartney there, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like
this. It looks like you have an Ace Frehley Les Paul back.
That's a copy, a copy somebody got for me, and it's a very good Chinese copy that's staggeringly impressive. There's a Iceman.
Oh, the Paul Stanley.
That's an axe bass right there. You can't really tell. It's just like it's Arrested Development in here.
I'm totally right. I mean, I actually, I'm trying to think of. I don't have too many signature things, here and there, whatever.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But I did have to get an Ingve Strat.
Ooh, yeah. Has it got the scalloped frets up in the
behind?
Yeah.
No, the whole thing.
The whole thing's scalloped. Oh, okay. Wow.
It's hard to play.
Cool.
That's what people like. Sometimes I see people like, Ingve scallops his frets, makes it easier to play fast. I go, that's absolutely not true. It's like twice as hard to play fast on it.
I've never tried to play a guitar like that. That sounds really weird. Like
it's really tough because it's really tough to play in tune. Because if you play by yourself, you're like, oh, I'm okay. Like I sound, but you start playing along with the recording, you realize like, oh, I'm pulling this guitar like super sharp and stuff. Yeah,
it'd be really easy to bend into the missing frets. Yeah.
But it's cool. But it sounds awesome.
I just love guitars. I'm like you. It's like we just kind of have stuff. So how long were you in Chicago?
Oh, I was there for about 7 years.
Wow, and that's a really big. You can't get much different than Los Angeles than Chicago.
I needed to leave LA. I needed to. I had been here my whole life, and I was kind of at a crossroads in my life.
Yeah.
And Billy was he was so cool. He was like, why don't you come to Chicago? And I was like, yeah, why don't I? And I was spending so much time there anyway because we would rehearse there. He had a studio there.
Yeah, it's based out of there.
Yeah, I was spending half the year there anyway. And he was so cool. He was like, just live with me for a while.
Really?
Put your stuff in storage, live with me. If you hate it, just go back.
Right.
Like leave your stuff and put it in storage in LA, come stay with me for a while. And so I lived with him for like 3 months. Then we went on tour, and
That's so funny.
And then finally, like almost like a year after I left, just before I got a place,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Because I didn't need to. And it was just so, I realized it was so sweet of him to do, because I really needed it at the time.
So he didn't pull you aside and go, okay, Jeff, it's time for you to get your own place.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, obviously he's got a pretty big house.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Good. Like Billy Corgan size house, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. He had, it's like, the only time I'd ever really see him in the house was like in the kitchen.
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. You kind of like run into each other in the kitchen, like, oh, hey, getting a coffee, and then off you go to your other portion of the house. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really cool, because I think I just needed to have a place to.
And now, what was the return to Los Angeles about? Just kind of time to get back to your roots?
I think, yeah. And, this kind of, as much as I love like hanging out in Chicago, it's a great place, but industry wise, there's just not a lot kind of going on for, if you, as like the Smashing Pumpkins, the Slashes, or it's not like, Slash, he loves to tour. He's like on the road, as much as possible.
This is killing him.
Yeah, but Pumpkins, we don't. It's not like we're on tour 10 months a year, and so it's like, what am I do? I wanted to be in a place where I could start exploring other things to get into.
Yeah,
musically, musical opportunities and whatnot.
Let's touch on that before we go, because I don't want to keep you too much longer. But
I'm in no rush.
Do you have plans to do like your own thing, or is that even?
I did. I started in the side project called Night Dreamer with a friend of mine, Mindy, and that's great. But it's a small. And we had a lot of fun. We just started playing live, like gotten like our live show together and playing. And it's much more of an electronic thing with backing tracks and much more in like kind of contemporary music kind of thing. And then COVID hit, so we're like, for a small band, it's just hard because you have to play live to really, like, you can only do so much online pimping. You know what I mean? Like that. So after a while, like it just. People are like, yeah, like, and so we have new music too.
Is she in LA?
She's in California now.
Okay,
so, yeah. Cool, and so it's like we have new music recorded, but I don't feel good. And we've made a couple videos, but I just don't really feel great releasing it, because just knowing that like 5 days from now, no one's going to care and there's nothing you can do about it.
Everybody's in that position right now. And I don't know, I've seen like Corey Taylor and a few of my friends release records, and it's like Bon Jovi released a record in 2020. So it's like really kind of like, with you and I both know we live in work in an industry where everything's on the road now. It's like making records.
Yeah. And so I kind of started making a solo record. I'm gonna So and I finished like the first song, and it's pretty crazy, because it's like it's got a kind of that swimmy shoegazy kind of thing, but there's a ton of shred guitar. I mean, there's crazy leads, like guitar tour de force tapping, and like, but not in like, I don't play that way in any ironic kind of way. It's just, to me, it's just the way that I hear guitar and music. And
are you singing?
But I'm not singing.
Okay.
So I have different I'm going to try to basically have different people. So I may have to actually rope you in on this at some point.
Count me in. Or some upright bass, or some really bad metal shredding on my part.
No,
I'd love to take a hit at something like that. That'd be a blast.
Yeah, I'm just kind of getting, because I'm like, how it is. It was like with Pumpkins, we actually just put out a record right the day after Thanksgiving it came out.
Yeah.
And so that there was a lot of like work up to that. And so then it was like, kind of like, well, where am I at? So it seems like I'm going to be sitting here, for another at least 6 months probably before anything really starts.
Exactly.
It's literally month to month. We got to see like kind of where this thing. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll do this. See where.
I say, and that's why not?
And that's what's so great about. I mean, you don't need much. And I was able to. The first song I actually went to a studio to cut drums and bass. I actually had my friend on this first song, my friend Orion Salazar played the bass, and Orion was the original bass player in Third Eye Blind.
Oh wow, okay.
And he's insane. Like I had no idea. Like I heard their songs, and my friends like, oh, you got to meet Orion. He's a great guy. And I'm like,
sure,
yeah. Okay. It's like, you don't. I'm like, I'm like, it's not Rush or I mean, I'm like,
right, yeah.
And so we were hanging out actually at the NAMM show one day, and we were at the Yamaha, basically compound, and he picked up the Billy Sheehan Attitude bass.
Oh, cool.
And he started shredding like all these like Eat 'em and Smile licks. And I was like, dude, like you can like,
wow.
I had no idea, like you can like really play.
The guy from Third Eye Blind can play the Billy Sheehan Eat 'em and Smile parts. I would not expect that. Yeah, that's really
like insane. Like
wow.
insane.
Wow.
Like I'm like, he's like really, and apparently because he's from the Bay Area and he kind of came up in that late 80s, early 90s, and what I've heard now, because he's such a humble guy. He doesn't, but people were like, oh, Orion and Les Claypool are like the two up and coming best bass players coming out of the Bay Area. No, he's really good. What I mean?
That's great. That's awesome.
He's just like all of us. Like in the 90s, he just had, he played songs, not.
Yeah, it wasn't about like, you're not going to bust out the Shy Boy solo in the middle of like 90s, pop rock. Or
you got to give me 5 minutes to ask you some questions.
Oh, here we go. Wow. Turning the tables. Okay.
Because because I'm a Kiss nut too.
yeah.
I'm a total Kiss, and over time, I mean, I love all eras. I feel like if you love a band, you gotta go hook. You gotta absorb the whole thing.
I was invested. Yeah, I'm one of those guys too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I've listened to so much Kiss in my life. You just like, okay, we all start with the 70s stuff, and then after you kind of like heard those first 6 albums so many times, and you're like, yeah, Dynasty's pretty good, Unmasked is pretty good. You kind of get into, even the Elders got some interesting things on it. And then you're like, well, okay, I've exhausted that now. And then you start going like, man, the 80s stuff is actually really, really great. You know what I mean? So you got to tell me when you've been playing with Bruce on the Kiss cruises and doing all that material, how fun is that?
Dude, it's so much fun. And the weird thing about it is when you're as invested as I am, it's kind of like, I'm like, yeah, of course I know those songs. And in my mind, I'm kind of going, are we going to be like, just kind of like playing for ourselves? I mean, do people want to hear, Thrills in the Night and,
so
all
good.
those songs? And I'm like, dude, you cannot dig deep enough, because you got to keep in mind, it's a Kiss convention on a boat. So it's the most hardcore Kiss fans on the planet, literally from like Germany, Australia, all on the boat together. And we just found the first time we did with Bob Kulick, Bob and Bruce Kulick. And we were doing like a ton of stuff from Bruce's era, a ton of stuff that Bob side 4, Kiss Alive 2.
Yeah.
Paul Stanley's solo album from 78. So it was just it was just like a dream come true for me. And we played, and I walked off stage, and I was like, that was really fun. I just thought like that was really fun. And then as you walk amongst the people and they're telling you, dude, you have no idea, like people are just so into it, and then we did 2 more with Bruce. We brought in Zach Throne from Corey Taylor's band to play, and he was doing the Gene stuff and I was doing the Paul stuff, and it was just like so much fun. And you just couldn't dig deep enough. Like we could find, like we literally played, last time we played a Time Traveler, a demo from like, I think Crazy Nights. I don't even know what
it is. Yeah.
Sword and Stone we played, like we were like playing, and people were just eating it up. And it,
it's kind of like you actually were playing, so you had to do like medleys.
We did a bunch of medleys. Like Bruce is big on medleys, like a Revenge medley, a Carnival Souls medley, a Animalized medley.
You what that? What's the first something Into the Fire? What's that?
You mean
Out on the Run? Is it called Out on the Run?
Oh, you mean Nowhere to Run?
Nowhere to Run.
Yeah,
it's the first song on Animalized.
Oh, that one. Yeah, you're right. That's I've Had Enough. Into the Fire. I've had enough.
Had enough. Yeah. Did you guys play that? I think you guys played that one, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. We did that. We did an Animalized medley. So it was like a lot of stuff.
I remember seeing it on YouTube. I was like, oh my God, this is as a big like, it's like, honestly, if I had a choice to see, and I know that people kept on saying this, and I, because I've been on like three sides of the coin, like the Biggest Kiss podcast, because I'm I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
And I think people really wanted for the end of the road tour, like to have your guys, the Bruce thing, open the show, because people want to hear those tunes.
Well, it's an interesting thing because it really is, Bruce is sort of the last guy waving that flag of that particular era.
Yeah.
I mean, the Kiss does play, they just played Tears Are Falling and a few things from that. I mean, it's such a gargantuan catalog. And I mean, what it's like in the Pumpkins. So add another 10, 15, 20 years to that, and then suddenly you've got the Kiss catalog. So they've got to cover a lot of stuff. And Gene and Paul have been really, really awesome about it. I think at first they were kind of like, yeah, Bruce is going to be on the boat. I don't even know if they knew he was bringing a band. It's kind of like, and then we came on and we were playing songs that they wrote and performed that they, and Paul was like, from what I understand, was very complimentary that, it's like, because I'm assuming that a guy who writes that many songs and has written that many songs isn't necessarily sitting around every day going like, how does I've Had Enough Into the Fire, or like, that song? I assume it's just something he's done. So when he sees people react so positively to something he's been such a big part of, we should all be so lucky. It'd be a thrill.
No, and you guys sounded great. And, and to be honest, it, like, because of just technology and whatnot, like, it's like those tunes live, like even when they played them back in the day, like it never sounded better than when you guys, I mean, it wasn't like just like, like it felt very authentic.
Oh, well, I appreciate that, because I mean, honestly, it's like even in the Slash band, Fitz and I are very, we try to be pretty religious about like, we're going to do these songs, let's do them the way people want to hear them. Within reason. They naturally, and I'm sure you do that too, where stuff that you didn't play on will naturally morph into your style, and things naturally morph into mine. But I try very hard to make sure we're doing, paying the correct respect to the original versions. And so when we do that with Bruce, it's kind of like, it's 10 times more challenging in a way, because you got to sing that. You're going to sing Paul Stanley songs when Paul was at the peak of his ability. You know what I mean? Like he was like stratospheric.
Well, what's crazy is that era, like on Animals, they actually went back up to A standard.
They did.
It's not half step. Yeah. And it's funny because I got to meet, I met them a few times here and there, and my friend who was with me, and he's a big Animalize fan, and he was telling me like, oh, Paul, actually one of my favorite Kiss albums is Animalize. And Paul said, he said, yeah, I was listening to that album the other day, and it sounds like, I heard my voice, it sounds like I was sucking helium. So he knows, he's like, yeah, I was just singing.
Well, he definitely was. He was definitely at the peak of his ability, and he was just doing it all. Like it was kitchen sink. Like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to sing my ass off for this entire era. I mean, but when you're young and you do,
which is so crazy to think, like now, because rock and roll has changed so much, that, when we were watching like Kiss Exposed or whatever, the Animalize concert on MTV, or like,
absolutely,
you were like, oh, they're older than like Rat, like like they've been around for a long, but, but if you look, like it was only like 1985.
I know.
They'd only been a band like 10 years. Like it's like nothing now.
I don't even think they were in their 40s yet at that point.
Which is they're probably in their mid 30s. You're like, oh, but at the time you're like, dude, they're like old.
They've been around forever, dude. Yeah. It's funny now, because now that we're, like, I don't know about you, but I look at McCartney putting out a record this year and I go, well, I guess that's what we do, right? If I'm 78 years old and I'm making a record,
Yeah, I really think, like it's just a different era. And, if you would have thought like, hey, at this age, I'd still be doing this,
I know,
but
I know I have grown children, and I often wonder, is it embarrassing for them? They think it's awesome, but it's, you kind of wonder sometimes if, Dad's putting his eyeliner on or whatever. You just think it's like some weird,
Totally. Isn't it? It's like the funnest job to be able to like just dress like an idiot still.
Yeah, I know. And people will often say to you, well, you look so, you look young for your age. I go, well, if you, dress the way we dress, or wear your hair the way we wear it. It just immediately makes you, you sort of get to live in an arrested state of development where you don't have to worry about, you know, was I supposed to just go get the golf shirt and the khakis and just go, here I am? You know, it's like, no, I guess we just keep going. It's all I know how to do. It's all you know how to do. It's just what we keep doing.
Like you get to be post 40 and have pictures of Yngwie Malmsteen on your wall.
Exactly. And there's a Batman mask hanging off of a, what is that? No, it's off of a, it's just a Fender copy. But yeah, there's like a, you know, just my house looks like, I don't know, it looks like, it looks like my kids' stuff is all in here, but it's actually mine. And you're like, man, grown ass man, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I try to keep, you know, like the guitar stuff like relegated to just the one space now. You know, because you know, you know, in the past, like you just like, oh, it's like you know, your living space can look like a guitar center.
That's what this looks like. I know. I have guitars everywhere, and they're, but you know, I'm trying my best to kind of. At least I have a cool wife where she's kind of like, no, that one looks good there. You know, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, I fortunately had to get, because I came out here and I'm like, oh, I have nowhere to put all these guitars. Okay, like I have to actually get a storage. I have to get storage, you know, and it's just like that's when you realize
you got too much stuff. Yeah.
And you know, I've really tried to change my mentality in that I really try to just like now, like I just play those guitars. Like when I'm recording, writing, I don't, I mean, I have a few more around and like I have Les Pauls and stuff. I'm like, if I really need something, you know, but
sure,
like, most of the stuff I just play, like I just try to go like, that's it.
I need to do that. And I honestly, like, this is just, there's a whole storage conversation here too for me.
Yeah,
and it's like, I keep thinking like, oh, I got to go there. Cause I love, like, I just thought of like this Dean Cadillac I have somewhere. And I was like, wow, I'd like to dig that thing out. And I was just like, at a certain point, I want to get to, like you say, like to a point where like, these are the guitars. These are my guitars that I need. And this other stuff is either going to go to stay at our compound thing, or it just needs to get handed off to somebody who's actually going to love and play these guitars. Because I really believe like the guitars that I play look beat down and like I have an 82 Les Paul is the one that I grew up with, and it looks like a 62. It just looks like it's been beat down. And I'm like, well, what do you expect? I played this thing, you know, all over the planet for, you know, every single day, and now it has mojo now. You know, I think that's what you do.
Nah, it's amazing, right? Yeah. That's what it is. It's like you got to put in the hours.
You do. But I think you're right. You gotta kind of streamline your arsenal to make sure you got it kind of dialed in.
It's just at some point it's just wasteful. You know what I mean?
I think that's the best word for it. Like this is turning into a museum of like, you know, nonsense.
But then you're like, you know, but I'm like, oh, I gotta have the Van Halen guitar. It's like, I got the Yngwie store. It's like, I'm never really gonna use it.
But you have to have it. It's so inspiring. And as a guitar player,
I had to. I was like, you know, like at the end, we finished a Pumpkins tour, and I'm like, okay, tour's done. I'm gonna treat myself to,
of course,
something. And like, what is the? And I'm like, I want an Yngwie Strat.
I appreciate that it's not like I'm going to buy a Bentley or a Rolex. No, I'm going to buy a guitar, and that's what you know. That's you're a guitar player. You should have that guitar. It's going to inspire you. And it's
funny, yeah, and it's funny because you know, I think once people get to know me, they're like, oh, like you really love metal, and you know, and it's like, no, I really do. I love that kind of stuff. And so when I called the Fender guy, I was like, hey, want to buy a guitar? He's like, okay, I don't know what, you know. He's like, whoa, Yngwie. He's like, I've only sold like 2 of those. I've worked for Fender for like 25 years. I've only sold like 2 of those to artists that have wanted the Yngwie Strat.
I love it. And they wouldn't expect the guy from Smashing Pumpkins to be one of them.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like, I want the Thurston Moore Jazz Master, you know what I mean? Which is, I'd like that too. You know,
I'd like that too, actually. Yeah. The Jay Mascis ones are the ones that I think are really rad. But yeah, I know.
Yeah, I have a few of the Japanese. When they were first made in Japan, they were purple.
Yeah, I know. Those were
I don't
cool.
know if they're purple sparkle.
Yeah.
And so, you know, at the time I was still kind of working with Fender, and I was like, you know, I really love those, but could I get one, and could I get like a black one or a white one? And then they're like, yeah, let me look into that. And then like 6 months later, I had a knock on my apartment when I lived in this apartment in LA, And it's the UPS guy's like, I got a couple packages, and I'm like, what are these? I opened up them, and it was like they had custom painted, you know, 2 of those J Mascis. Yeah, one white, one black. So
cool.
yeah, I have like these kind of one up. Yeah, they're really cool.
That's really cool. See the benefits you get for being in the Smashing Pumpkins, everybody. That's what you get.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Or you get Yamaha to build you that like ridiculously fluorescent.
I love it. That's a Yamaha. I was going to comment on that. That's really cool.
Yeah. I got 3. That I guess Scotty Hill from Skid Row told me he calls it emergency orange. So
I love
emergency orange, and the white one and that kind of turquoise one. They're like 3 custom made Pacificas.
I love it.
And they're great. They're like 24 frets, Floyd Rose, like scalloped from 21
oh, really?
24, like the gem, like Steve Vai.
That's
gems,
what it was.
Yeah. And they're just, that's what's so cool about like now, you know, in Pumpkins, I basically use like these super strat shredder guitars because like the alternative days are kind of gone. No one cares anymore.
That's true.
I mean,
actually,
some people do, but like I don't care what they think, you know, because I just want to do what I want to do. And
we've kind of crossed over into a, you know, it's like it's kind of everything is everything. You can have a Les Paul or you can have a Super Strat. No one cares. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like free.
I mean, did you ever think like, you know, neon guitars would come back in? I mean, there's like you see like all these kind of like Kramer's back out, and they're making, you know, all these fluorescent color guitars. And
it's fascinating because like I've had this conversation since when Eddie passed away. I said, you know, a lot of people heard me say this, but he didn't just change playing, he changed the guitar, because that guitar that he built became kind of like everybody needed a Super Strat. And every company built them, and it nearly crushed the Fenders and the Gibsons and the big guys, because
for sure.
So Kramer's and Jacksons and Charvels and all these companies, Hamer, like everybody was doing these things, and then Slash and guys like that, or mostly Slash really, strap on a Les Paul one day, and everybody goes, "Hey, wait a second," and then, you know, and it's been kind of that way ever since. But
he really did. I mean, he really did. I mean, he. I mean, obviously there were other bands like Faster Pussycat and stuff that were kind of back there, you know, and whatever. But even like LA Guns, Tracy Guns was like playing like Kramer's and, you know what I mean?
PC Rich,
PC Riches, yeah.
Do you know who I remember around that era who was playing a Les Paul was Tom Kiefer from Cinderella.
Always
playing a Les Paul custom, and I remember him being kind of like, I remember that being kind of mildly unusual at the time, because Jeff LaBar was playing a Kramer Beretta, which was the style at the time. So I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. And that's kind of why, to be honest, I bought a Gibson Les Paul, my white custom back then, because I thought, that's so cool that Tom Kiefer's playing. Steve Clark from Def Leppard was playing really low.
Yeah, but he always put the Kahlers on him.
And had a Kahler on it. That's right. 3 pickup with a Kahler. Yeah, it was like next level. Yeah. Oh man, I could do this all day, but I gotta. I know. I'm gonna get out of your hair. Otherwise,
okay, cool, man.
I'm gonna make sure I let the people know that they can hang around and listen to us nerd out to guitars forever, because that's actually like when I really start to go. You know, he's like.
No, me too. Believe me, I know. Yeah,
I can't wait to cross paths actually in person. I'm supposed to be out in LA sooner than later, and I know we're not really supposed to hang out.
Yeah, hit me up, and once, you know, hopefully if things calm down a bit, I would love to go out to Vegas and, you know, if you're playing somewhere or whatever.
Absolutely, you know what I mean? When things chill, it'll be great to hang. And like I say, I just can't wait to hear what you guys come up with and what you guys got going on. So all the best.
Cool, man.
All the best, brother, man.
Thank you.
Big love.
Bye. Peace.